Thanks very much, Matt. Yeah, we're looking forward to the first track action beginning here in Malaysia very soon. The fourth running of the Malaysian Grand Prix. The previous winners, well, Michael Schumacher twice and Eddie Irvine once. Ferrari have dominated things here in Malaysia over the last few years. And with prospects from Melbourne, the way that Michael went there, John, it could be much the same story this weekend. We're going to have to watch those Ferraris.
Well, indeed, I think nothing's going to be very different to what we saw 2 weeks ago in Australia. And Michael Schumacher and Ferrari are so confident they can bring the 2001 car here to a totally different circuit. Obviously, very different temperatures. There we can see 35 degrees track, 30 ambient, and 62 humidity. Now it's going to build up as the day progresses. This session, of course, will be just a bit of an exploratory one. Sam Michael explained what they've got with the Williams. Other teams will be carrying out other modifications that have taken place between Australia and Malaysia. So first session very much about finding their way around the circuit again and understanding what's going to happen. But then the second part of that 1 hour session in this afternoon, we'll see the team starting to get down to work, working on tyre setups, working on fuel load setups, and trying to get a benchmark for what they will need for Sunday, because once we go into Saturday's practice and qualifying, that's what will determine their grid positions, and that will be a very, very important part of the weekend.
Well, the temperature is high, the fans are blowing already, even though it's fairly early on in proceedings here in Malaysia. The car's just being fired up in the pit lane at the moment, and everybody getting ready for the start of the second round of the World Championship. Now, some questions were answered in Australia. There's no doubt that we saw how strong Ferrari will be once again, but in some ways we didn't get a full reading of all the team performances throughout the course of this year. Williams, for example, Ralf Schumacher out of the race in such dramatic fashion right at the beginning, hoping for much better things. And last year here in Malaysia, he pushed the Ferraris very hard in qualifying. It was a tremendous performance and really perhaps the first true showing of Williams BMW's potential last year.
Well, of course, they've got that engine, which is absolutely unbelievable. It's regarded as being the most powerful in Formula One, probably something in the region of 870 horsepower, and maybe a little bit more for qualifying. Now, those are figures that people are calculating. They don't really know. Only BMW would be able to give you an answer to that, and they're not about to give away a secret like that. But also on this circuit, the nature of the circuit is it varies. You've got a lot of low-speed sections, two corners which are as slow as 50 miles an hour, and then, of course, a lot of high-speed braking as you come down the two straights that run parallel to each other, one coming into turn 15 at the end of the lap, one then at turn 1 at the beginning of a lap, and you're braking from about 200 miles an hour down to 50 miles an hour. Big emphasis therefore on the ability to brake, but also on the ability to put power down. And it seems from last year that it was that quality, or those two qualities, the braking ability and the traction ability of Michelin, that did give them some advantage. It was in the faster corners where they probably lost out to Bridgestone, but that's 1 year ago. We'll wait to see what's going to happen here over the 3 days.
Just under 8 minutes to go until the start of this free practice session. Remember, we'll see 2 sessions of free practice of 1 hour each. The cars will be going out, and it's really an opportunity to get a chance to see what the cars are like. Normally with full tanks or semi-full tanks of fuel, they're not in qualifying trim here today. They're very much more in race trim as to how they're going to run the car in the race itself. So, John, a lot of basic decisions to be made on setup here.
Very much so, and it is a question of whether you choose to do the initial 1 hour and get all your work done, or wait until the second hour and get all your work done. The problem with a circuit like Sepang is that, of course, it's not used regularly, other than for maybe some local events. It takes time for the Formula One teams and tyres to lay down their own particular rubber brands, and some rubber goes down quicker than others, and sometimes one rubber doesn't like the other. But eventually teams will find a benchmark time, and from that they will move forward. Of course, looking back to what they did 1 year ago will be what they will be aiming at. With the improvements in tyres, the improvements in car aerodynamics and performance and engine horsepower, we should see the 2001 pole times being exceeded here this year.
Kuala Lumpur, just away from the airport, just a couple of miles away from the Kuala Lumpur. First held Formula One back in 1999, which saw victory for Eddie Irvine on that occasion. If you remember, Michael Schumacher helping Eddie Irvine to take victory, and with that giving the points advantage going into the final round of the series, which of course Mika Hakkinen went on to win. But very good communications at the airport, as we said, just over the road. And in fact, some cars not making it from the airport even to the track this weekend. The Phoenix team, which bought out the Prost cars from last year. Big story in Formula One that's been over the last couple of weeks. Well, they didn't even get out of customs to come to scrutineering, and they are not entering this weekend's race.
A very complex story, and one that will unwind certainly over this weekend and maybe into future races. But essentially the Prost team went into administration, and the assets of that were then bought by the Phoenix group. They fitted the engine that TWR used at the end of the 99-2000 series. That was a Barnhart designed V10 engine. It's been installed in the back of that Prost chassis. The team came out, and I have to say I give them credit for doing what they did by showing intent that they are serious. They're not just sort of buying the assets and then saying, well, excuse me, sir, can I please join in your game? They actually flew out the cars, the personnel, so intent is there. But the issue will be as to whether they've got the rights that Prost had. I don't know whether those rights will be transferred with the administration. It was a bit like a giant car boot sale, in fact. So Mr. Eccleston, talking to Gerhard Berger, will be saying a great deal indeed.
Yes, I'm sure Bernie will have very much his own ideas on that whole situation. And in fact was quoted last week as saying, well, they've paid quite a lot of money for basically what is just a couple of show cars. We shall see how that develops. A quick look at the grandstand there, the unique double-sided grandstand here in Malaysia that's capable of holding about 30,000 spectators. And let's hope that we get a good turnout on race day in Malaysia, with plenty for the Malaysian fans to cheer about. Not only the Ferraris and the success they've had here in recent years, but of course a Malaysian driver this weekend, Alex Young. First time a Malaysian driver competes in the Malaysian Grand Prix. And we only have to think back a couple of weeks ago to the support that Mark Webber got in Australia to imagine just how much enthusiasm there will be for Alex Young making his Malaysian Grand Prix debut here this weekend. Now, Rubens Barrichello getting ready to come out on track. He's always gone well around this Malaysian circuit. 3.4 mile track. As you mentioned, John, it is a popular one with the drivers. Ralf Schumacher now strapped into the Williams, ready to go. Juan Pablo Montoya did compete here last year. In fact, he lost most of the Friday session. They had problems with the car. He only managed a few laps on the Friday, but still managed to qualify in 6th place. A good effort from Montoya, but Williams definitely in good shape here last year. And David Coulthard, he's always gone well around this track. Has had a few opportunities in the past, hasn't quite come together for him, has challenged the Ferraris, and in fact was leading the race a couple of years ago when Mika Häkkinen picked up a penalty for jumping the start, but unfortunately reliability wasn't to favour him on that occasion, and he ended up dropping back behind Michael Schumacher and finishing second to him. David has to make things happen here this weekend. Well,
I think David has really got to make things happen all season. He's in the unique position of now being, in effect, team leader, but he's got a young teammate in Kimi Räikkönen who really did a great job in Australia 2 weeks ago. Not only did he do a good job, midway through the race, out of nowhere, he popped in the fastest race lap. And I'm still waiting for an explanation from McLaren as to why Räikkönen could suddenly do a lap quicker than anybody else, basically on his own. And there it was, and just did one lap, and all the others went back to the pace he'd been running at pretty much throughout that race in Australia. So Räikkönen clearly has got the pace, and if he can put together 56 laps like that, then I tell you, Räikkönen's got to be considered not only a podium presenter, but also on maybe defeating Michael Schumacher and the mighty Ferrari.
Well, that's quite something, but we'll have to wait and see. There is the Malaysian, Alex Young, competing in his first Malaysian Grand Prix. Started in Grand Prix racing towards the end of last year with the Minardi team, but obviously didn't compete in Malaysia as it was early in the calendar again last season. So this is his first opportunity to race on home ground, knows the track well, and of course used to these weather conditions, and that is a factor. Most of these other drivers have spent time over here over the last couple of weeks to acclimatise themselves, as we were talking about. Takuma Sato's been in this part of the world doing a bit of training, just getting used to the conditions, but Alex Young does have that advantage of knowing these conditions so well.
Yes, I mean, it is an advantage initially, but I mean, everybody out there really, they're very, very fit. They've been spending time in these conditions since Australia. They've adjusted to not just to the heat, but to the humidity. And the heat that you get here, it's not like going into maybe to Spain and getting your summer holidays where it is hot. It's just everywhere you are, the heat is just insufferable. You just can't escape it. So everybody's spending time acclimatizing to it, hydrating as much as possible, training in the heat, doing what Michael Schumacher does, keeping out of air-conditioned rooms so his body isn't going through the various swings of hot, cold, hot, cold.
Well, the cars are already beginning to line up to come out onto the track to start this first free practice session for the Malaysian Grand Prix. It'll be a 1-hour session. You'll see the countdown at the top of the screen to take us through this. And we're already seeing a number of cars coming straight out onto track, and that's good news. And it looks like Mark Webber will lead them out onto the track. Takuma Sato in the Jordan right behind him. And we're getting a good number of cars coming out onto track. Air temperature 31 degrees. I'm sure we're going to see that climbing. Track temperature 36 at the moment. Well, last year at times it was over 40 degrees, up to about 43 degrees. And a couple of years ago it was up to as high as 50 degrees at one stage.
The good news is the humidity is dropping. That means that chance of or they were concerned about maybe coming through later in the afternoon appear to be receding, and also for the drivers and, as we've mentioned, for the teams, makes their life just that little bit more just easy.
Kimi Raikkonen waiting with those brand new Michelin tyres, ready to be scrubbed in on these first few laps of free practice. He raced here last year, remember, of course, when he was driving for the Sauber team. Unfortunately, his race ended before it began. He had a clutch problem, and that meant that he didn't get underway at all. So limited race mileage, although of course he did do all the free practice sessions, knows the track reasonably well, and he'll see if he can improve on his 14th starting position when he was driving for Sauber last year. I'm sure he'll do much better than that this weekend.
Well, just looking at Barnoldi, this is turn 9. This is one of the 2 slowest corners on the circuit. First gear or second gear, depending on whether you run a 6 or a 7-speed gearbox, and not much more than 50 miles an hour in the middle of the corner. Typical corner where the mechanical side of the car takes over from the aerodynamics. Aerodynamics, of course, work based on the square of the speed of the car, so at 50 miles an hour there's not an awful lot of push on the car at any point.
No, but there's certainly a few corners here, John, where there's an awful lot of aerodynamic downforce, where they're cornering at speeds of up to 150, 160 miles an hour. And that's where we can see those cars with great downforce really producing the goods.
Indeed, and you'll see it as they come out of, for example, turn 4, and then further round, or into turn 4, then round 5 and 6, a very, very fast part of the circuit. Basically a long, very wide sweeping S, but everybody coming out of 15, in fact, filing back into the pit lane. This is the first chance the cars have had to run since Australia on a racetrack. And for many of those teams, Ben, they're doing so much work just to repair the damage. And of course, teams want to make sure that that repair work has been carried out. And there are no minor problems, particularly with maybe water leaks or any liquid leak that would cause the car to stop on circuit. And then, of course, no spare car available today or until qualifying would be a great loss of time for the team and for the driver.
Yes, talking about all those repairs that have been done, Peter Sauber was saying that nearly £400,000 worth of damage was done with his 2 cars being involved in the initial accident in Melbourne. So it just shows you how it adds up. Looking at the Drivers' Championship, of course, as they finished the race in Australia, and that gives the reigning world champion Michael Schumacher the initial advantage. 10 points he won, and he'll be hoping to maintain that advantage here this weekend. But the McLarens, no doubt, will be chasing. And watch out for the Saubers too. They have gone well again already this year. In Melbourne they showed their pace once more. Felipe Massa just out qualifying Nick Heidfeld. They have the Petronas engine, so a lot of local support for them. Petronas, the big state-owned oil company based here in Malaysia, involved with Sauber for several years now, and certainly that engine, that Ferrari engine, is what it is. But Petronas name is producing the goods, and Sauber looking to try and repeat that 4th place in the Constructors last year.
Well, the engine that Sauber have is effectively the qualifying engine that Ferrari used back at the Italian Grand Prix, and in fact the engine that Ferrari have got is probably virtually identical, other than for maybe some very minor details. We have to wait until the 2002 Ferrari engine comes with the 2002 car just to see how much further progress has been made, but it's a very, very good package. And remember, the Bridgestone tyre was the tyre that won the Grand Prix in Australia, and had there not been that first corner shunt which took out 8 cars, including the 2 Saubers, we may well have seen a Sauber or 2 finishing in the top 6.
TC5 is standard. Okay, Bob, we have the front brake tape off, clutch position 1.
Our privileged,
is good.
our privileged access to team radio, and we'll always try and listen to that when we get the opportunity, and try not to keep talking once we hear the team radios in action. Sometimes they will be used and we can hear them, sometimes we don't have access, but we do have unrivaled access to some of those team conversations that are going on. Sometimes it sounds like code, John, when they're talking about various things they're doing on the cars.
Now that's something intent. Look, they're deliberately blocking. The Ferrari guys trying to catch a number on the side of the Michelin tyres. This will be brought up at some point in the weekend. That is, let's say, gamesmanship being carried to the limits right now. We're only 6 minutes into this session.
Well, that's all a part of Formula One, and certainly he wasn't hiding away, was he? It's fairly obvious that he was a Ferrari man. There's not much doubt about that. Let's take a look. Well, real eyeball-to-eyeball stuff going on down there in the pits. The competition between the drivers might be intense, but it's just as intense between the team members. I mean,
obviously Ferrari know the Michelin tyres because they see what's there, but they want to know what McLaren are running at what particular point. Get the numbers off the tyres, bring it back to us. That's information gathering. That will help Ferrari to know as soon as possible. They can correlate a lap time against a particular tyre choice. What you've got are 3 sets of tyres for these 2 sessions today. You must run only 2 compounds of those 3 sets. So you've got the optimum tyre, the prime tyre, and then you've got the optional tyre. It's up to the teams whether they go with 2 sets of primes or 2 sets of optionals. That's information that Ferrari want as quickly as possible.
Now looking at Pedro de la Rosa, one of the first to actually start putting a lap together. So we'll keep an eye on his progress. Of course, Jaguar really struggling for pace in Melbourne, qualifying towards the back of the grid. Very disappointing, and yet finishing up with a very, very important 4th place for Eddie Irvine. So it came good for them in the end, but there's no doubting the disappointment in the performance of the Jaguar R3.
Well, tremendous amount of thought has gone into what a Jaguar are going to do. Are they going to continue with the R3? Are they going to bin it? I mean, there's a litany of things are wrong with this car. Apart from anything, the aerodynamics were wrong. Then the rear uprights were found to be inadequate. The design was not really an ideal design, so they've had to have new rear uprights constructed. They're having new front uprights constructed. They're actually being made by John Barnard's company down in Guildford, because Jaguar just haven't got the capacity to do all this work. They're also taking the chassis over to Germany, to Ford's plant at Cologne, to do a torsional stiffness test to ensure that there's nothing lacking in the chassis. And since Niki Lauda's thoughts for the 2002 season were let's reduce weight, let's make a fast car, maybe the design of this car has gone too far, and there's flexibility within the chassis. So all those facts will be known very shortly. But what an awful start to the season for Jaguar, in a year when they were looking to really move forward, step up into the grid.
Well, work continues in the Ferrari pit. Nick Damon has caught up with Ross Brawn, so let's hear from him.
Two went well last week. If this been a normal race with European temperatures and conditions, would you have bought the 2002?
I mean, testing and racing are 2 different things. I mean, racing is 3 cars plus all the spares plus all the preparation, and we weren't really in the position to do that for Malaysia, and our judgment was it wasn't necessary. We're still learning a 2002 car. We know the 2001 car very well, so it's not just about the potential of the car, it's how well you're going to use it when you get to the track, and we need a little bit more time with the 2002 car.
How confident are you that Bridgestone can maintain the advantage they obviously had in Australia?
Oh, they're very strong, Bridgestone. I mean, there'll be some ups and downs, I'm sure, but I mean, obviously we chose to stay with Bridgestone because we think they're the best company, and the partnership between Ferrari and Bridgestone hopefully will be successful. So even if we have a hiccup, I'm sure Bridgestone and Ferrari are going to respond in the strongest way possible.
And how long before your boys go out?
next few minutes.
Thanks a lot, Ross.
So Ross Brawn telling us about their plans. Now, John, there's been quite a lot of talk about the difference between some of the cars underneath the front wing and particularly how the front suspension's mounted. Looking at the Ferrari pictures here, last year's car mounted in the middle, the front suspension. This year's car, the lower wishbones mounted to the side, so you've got a tunnel of air beneath.
Yeah, Sauber were the ones that really pioneered this philosophy. The advantage is you get a better aerodynamic performance. The downside is the mechanical integrity of that front suspension is not as good as that centrally mounted location for those front legs or the bottom front wishbones. And it's just a judgment that teams are having to make, whether the mechanical side can be strong enough, located well enough to prevent any flexing or any deflection that might occur in the front suspension. I suspect inevitably everybody will go over to that. We've seen some teams do it part way. Ferrari are doing it now. We're waiting for Williams to do that as well. But inevitably, I think you're going to see the trend will follow what Sauber introduced just over a year ago.
Well, the two Minardis on track at the moment. You saw Mark Webber just coming back out of the pits, but this is Alex Young, who's on circuit at the moment, just coming into turn 11 on, just going wide over the curb there. That wasn't quite what he planned, I don't think.
Well, it just shows you that the track is still quite green. Very easy to run too quickly into a corner. Alex Young's only done, let's look down and see, he's only done 2 laps. This is his 3rd lap. He's just on his out lap from the pits. So, you know, he's really just finding his way around this racetrack in a Grand Prix car. He's driven around it in ordinary cars, but he's never been in a Grand Prix car. So he's got to just get his speed distance judgment and find where the track is giving up grip and where there is grip. Again, look in the exit. Where it's dirty, the back end just suddenly kicks out. It'll take maybe the best part of half this session before we see a green line disappearing and a black line appearing, and that's the indication that the track is now beginning to accept the rubber from the tyres of these cars.
Yes, that's a good point, John. In fact, over recent years, we've seen quite a big difference in time gained between the first practice sessions on the Friday and then the Saturday free practice sessions. As the rubber begins to go down, we've seen a couple of seconds improvement. So again, I'm sure we'll see that over the course of the weekend. The existing lap record actually belongs to Mika Häkkinen from a couple of years ago, but the qualifying record is from last year, and that was set by Michael Schumacher, a 1 minute 35.220. Don't expect to see times anything like that, though, here today. Free practice Friday, dirty track. I can't imagine they'll be getting anywhere near 1:35. Perhaps below 1 minute 40 into the 1 minute 39s. Not much faster than that.
It'll depend a little bit on the reaction that the cars and the tyres and the circuit have. I mean, certainly the teams at the top I would expect to be well inside the 1 minute 40, maybe closer to 1:35 than you anticipate. But it will very much depend on the programme that the teams are going through. And certainly in this 1 hour session, a lot of the work will be done towards the Grand Prix and trying to find out as much as possible about the differences in the two tyre compounds, whether to go with the prime tyre, that's the tyre that Bridgestone and Michelin will consider to be the ideal race tyre, but they will try the optional tyre just in case there may be something there that maybe, well, might work to our advantage. And that was why the Ferrari engineer was down watching intently at what McLaren were doing.
Riding on board with Alex Young, let's just watch him accelerate out of that final turn, turn 15, up across the line. And a lap completed for the young Malaysian, 1 minute 47.869. Not a particularly fast time at this stage. You can just see him flicking the down change on the left-hand side of the steering wheel and continuing on for another lap as Michael Schumacher looks as though he's set to come out fairly soon now.
Yeah, I would think Michael will just let the track settle for about 15 minutes. We're almost 15 minutes into the session. Well, no, in fact, he's not. He's just taken his balaclava off and... well, he's got a race helmet, he's got a backup helmet, and the team diving into that car. Now, whether there's a problem in the Ferrari or not, suddenly they're all working around. There's lots and lots of electronic controls right under the driver's leg.
Just taking a little look at Alex Young, a replay here of him going through those first couple of corners. It's a tricky bend, that left-hander.
Again, it's the second slowest corner on the circuit, and again, it's a very mechanical part of the circuit. Cars are on a high downforce setup here, so they also may be fairly stiffly sprung to carry that downforce on the higher parts of the circuit. So consequently, in those low-speed parts of the circuit, there's little mechanical grip, and you can see the front of the car and the back of the car sliding quite a lot.
a view of Nick Heidfeld as he waits to come out on track, and another man to watch closely this weekend. As we said earlier, the performance of the Sauber very promising once again this season, and running with the Bridgestone tyres worked so well in Melbourne, but will they be the ones to have here in Malaysia? Well, the Michelin runners will be hoping they've got the right equipment, and here is one of the Michelin users. This is the Toyota of Mika Salo.
And we're coming through some of these really quick corners round the back. This is round corners 5, 6, and coming into that double right-hander at 7. Very easy in this corner. That was you've seen incidents before, and certainly round through 5 and 6 last year in the race was a problem for Olivier, a practice problem. And then the two Ferraris went off in the rain, and there was just chaos all around the circuit, virtually monsoon conditions. So easily to be caught if a driver and a car have a problem. If they lay oil down, you're so committed round those turns 5 and 6 that really, if you're on the racing line, you're going to take a big trip off track into the grass, through the gravel, hopefully get back on without making contact, anything solid.
Well, it was amazing last year when Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello both went off, managed to get back on, and they had that farcical pit stop, if you remember. Michael was sitting in the pits for about a minute and a half, but because the safety car was out, he didn't lose much time and ended up fighting his way back through to take the win on intermediate tyres. Just looking at the Toyota there, and Mika Salo, who scored that 1 point in Australia, of course, and the team working very hard, using extra little bits of bodywork around the rear suspension, just enclosing that rear suspension and gearbox area, trying to tidy up the airflow at the back of the car.
Well, it's a very critical part of the airflow around the drive shaft, the toe link, the bottom wishbone. Teams now exhausting the air out through the top of the bodywork, and that avoids some of the problems of instability that used to occur when the exhausts were coming straight out the back. It's just a cleaner way to exhaust the air. And of course then the wing airflow, the rear wing airflow is critical also.
Watching Giancarlo Fisichella, as you can see from the intermediate times that have been set. Pedro de la Rosa, there is let's just take a look. It is Webber, it is Mark Webber who's gone off onto the gravel down there at turn number 8, I think that is.
He's coming into 7, I think it was on the exit of turn 6 he lost it. So here, looking again, Mark Webber comes in again, a green track, not an awful lot of grip, too much speed, onto the grass, continues across the grass into the gravel. Let's hope getting a request. The gravel certainly there is, again, fairly compacted. The car doesn't get bogged down, but I think maybe Mark just lost the engine. So therefore, the clutch, which you've got a 5-second grab on the clutch automatically, but if you don't grab the clutch lever, then the engine will stall. So it's a big bad start for Mark Webber.
That is a bad start. Remember, they're not allowed to go out in the spare car in this session, so that's it. If that car is abandoned there, he cannot come back out.
That's right, that's the end of the session for Mark Webber. He'll have to wait until 1 o'clock local time, and we'll just see Enrique Bernoldi going quickest in the arrows. But for Mark Webber, he's going to go back to the pits. He'll kick himself for what was just a fundamental error. Maybe you're still carried by the weekend, 2 weekends ago, when he got 5th place in his first Grand Prix. You see him there in the back of the scooter going back to the pits. Well, let's come back to reality, Mark. You now know what being a Grand Prix driver really is all about.
Yeah, he's got to be able to pick himself up from this and learn the track as quickly as possible in the next free practice session. Not the easiest track to find how to go quickly on, so he's got to use the time later on today to good effect. At least he hasn't damaged the car, so they'll be able to get it back cleanly, hopefully, and that'll mean he'll be back out safely. David Coulthard sitting in the pits at the moment. We've got just a few cars out there currently. Giancarlo Fisichella is on track, Enrique Bernoldi. Montoya's out there at the moment, so is Felipe Massa, but most other drivers are content to sit in the pits and just let everyone else clean the track off.
And we sort of suspected that this may be the case. Nobody particularly keen to go out and do any work that's maybe considered too serious, but fortunately David Coulthard coming out for what we'll hope will be a run of possibly an out lap, 3 timed laps and then an in lap, as we look at Juan Pablo Montoya beginning the start of something that might be a little bit more approaching what we can expect to see through this next session.
Well, we'll keep an eye on the Colombian's progress. You can see some interesting little flick-ups on the back of the side pods on the Williams this weekend. Watch out indeed for extra little aerodynamic tweaks on the cars to improve the cooling, because their temperatures are so high in Malaysia. Often we see little things sprouting up on the car. I'm just trying to listen to the radio there. Busy talking on the radio and correcting opposite lock at the same time.
Yeah, not the easiest thing to do on a track that is still slippery, but here through turns 5 and 6, that's the exit of where we saw Webber go off. Very, very quick corners. Track still very green.
Copy that one. A lot of oversteer. The downshift still not working?
No, it's going all over the place. Like third gear for the herpes.
Well, Montoya not too happy at the moment, but in the pits meanwhile Peter Windsor has caught up with Jackie Stewart.
So Jackie, lovely to see you. Tremendous conditions for driving race cars today, eh? Don't you wish you were driving out there?
Well, I think the modern Grand Prix drivers at least got everything sealed out of the the cockpit. In our days, it was hot air and everything else that was getting in there. So, in this humidity and this temperature, it's still tough.
And it's going to sort out the men from the boys, right?
Pardon me?
It's going to sort out the men from the boys in terms of fitness.
I don't know. The general fitness of a Formula One driver today is incredibly high, and they've all known about this place. Most of them have been here before. It is the hottest Grand Prix of the year. They're well trained for it. I know that the Jaguar drivers and I know that the McLaren drivers have been training in very humid and very hot climate. So, I mean, if they don't get dehydrated, if they keep their head in shape, there's no reason for them not to get it done, but for sure they'll be tired.
We've just been talking in the studio, Jackie, about the problems in the team, the performance of the car in Melbourne. What's your take on the chassis performance at the moment?
You mean the Jaguar?
I do indeed.
They're going through a very, very bad patch. The car's got both a mechanical problem and an aerodynamic problem. The aerodynamic problem is by far the most important, because that's the greatest strength or weakness of a modern Grand Prix car. And they have made some changes between Australia and here. Whether those will work, the jury's still out. I think today and tomorrow are going to be important for them. I don't think there's a quick fix in it, Peter, because I think it's a question of people, getting people on board, some young people with new ideas, and that won't happen in 5 minutes. It's more than a one-year program, but they do have the will to do it. I think Niki Lauda has a chance to get it done because he's a good decision maker, he's a good businessman, and he knows about motor racing. But I'm afraid there's just been too many changes internally since the team changed its name for it to be stable. And at the end of the day, what you're talking about is people. If you get good people, you get good results.
Niki's quite fond of saying that there is no wind tunnel at Jaguar. Niki's quite fond of saying there is no wind tunnel at Jaguar. What was your philosophy towards having your own tunnel when you were running Stewart?
Well, we couldn't afford a wind tunnel of our own when we started. When you're a start-up company, our first year we had to find £28 million in order to start up in our first year of Grand Prix racing. If you're going to buy a wind tunnel, you're going to have to pay about $50 to $60 million just for the wind tunnel. We didn't have that money, so we had to rent, and it's still rented.
Well, Jaguar have that money, so let's hope they turn it around soon. Thanks very much, sir.
In a matter of weeks, they'll have their own wind tunnel.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's all happening on track at the moment. David Coulthard getting out of a very smoky-looking McLaren Mercedes, and that's not the start to the Malaysian weekend that he wanted. We also saw Ralf Schumacher having had a spin, but I think he's got himself going again. He has. But let's just take another look at this, John. Ralf Schumacher getting it a little wrong on this slippery surface.
Well, it just goes to prove even one of the top teams in Formula One, a top driver, a Grand Prix winner, can get it all wrong. So, you know, Ralf Schumacher had the presence of mind and caught the clutch. This is the onboard view coming down into turn 15. Braking, probably not very late, turns in. Oops, and all of a sudden the back end isn't there. No rear grip. Still a green track on fairly fresh tyres. I don't know whether that was the optional tyre or the prime tyre, but certainly Ralf Schumacher, an early wake-up call for him. And one that he'll think, oops, maybe I just should take it a bit easier until we're satisfied the grip is there.
Coulthard's car, meanwhile, is being pushed away, and so that's the end of his session. So very limited running time for David. He did 3 laps, and he had just set a pretty fast sector time before the thing expired.
and it expired pretty spectacularly. It looked to me to be an engine failure. Certainly there was a big cloud of smoke came out from the right-hand bank. There was then flames coming out from the right-hand side of the car as well. He pulled off very close to a marshal's post. They dived on the car with the powder extinguishers and got the fire out. But certainly very disappointed for Coulthard. Worrying for McLaren Mercedes-Benz. Is this a one-off or worse?
No stability whatsoever from the front. No, it turns in quite fast, very fast. When you go into the middle, the front just gives up and rear comes around. So, and the lap marker was all over the place, and we want to have the return to foregoing. We need second. Basically, put the gears that I had on, not the spec'd ones or anything. Just what I tried before, and then as we go on, we can change that. I think, man, the really high speed corners is a big oversteer problem. Just we're.
So Montoya explaining to the team just what's not right at the moment.
I have to say, it reminds me of what he was saying when we were in Melbourne 2 weeks ago. Everything was wrong, understeer here, then oversteer there. You know, plan is still relatively new in Formula One, and the track is green, and you will get these kind of responses. The most important thing is not to overreact. You end up chasing your tail, and you end up coming back to where you started in the first place.
That's right, and well, as the track gets more and more grip over the course of the weekend, that can completely change how the car's handling. At the moment, we're still seeing Bernoldi fastest, but Nick Heidfeld, who we're looking at here, has just gone second fastest. Good effort from him. Montoya is third, Ralf Schumacher fourth, then it's Fisichella and De La Rosa. Michael Schumacher here has only done one lap and hasn't actually set a time yet.
He's just done that installation lap, gone back into the pits, deciding to wait it out. There's some 33 minutes, 45 seconds of the session remaining, so maybe he'll go out at the half hour. He probably feels, and not unjustifiably, that the circuit is still not worth wasting laps doing. So he's going to sit there, keep an eye on the timing screens. So far, the fastest lap is some 6 seconds away from his pole time from last year. And we just get a glimpse of Kimi Räikkönen going back out onto track. Of course, only one McLaren now available for this session. David Coulthard's car pulled off track, which looks suspiciously like it was an engine failure. And well, bad start for McLaren. Not Ron Dennis's thoughts would be, I think, what's going on here, guys?
Yeah, not very happy about that, but let's hope they can get things sorted out for the next free practice session. Michael Schumacher ventures down the pit lane at a track that he rates as one of his favourites, and there's no great surprise there. He's won the race twice. He's always started it from pole position as well. I wonder if he's going to maintain that 100% record here this weekend. Judging by his performance in Melbourne, he has every chance to do that. But as we know, last year Ralf Schumacher did push him in qualifying, and perhaps Montoya will do the same. A little bit of a practice start from Michael on the way out.
Yep, every opportunity taken he uses. Michael is on top of the game more than any other racing driver.
Try early cut position, start position 1, then 2 and 3 and 4.
Yeah, we're just going to do 3-time laps, so just do your first lap, and then on the next 2 laps, just come up to position 5. Yeah, go 2, 3, 4, 5 throughout the next two laps. Are we looking, Nick?
Giancarlo Fisichella ready to come back out for a few more laps.
And of course they've got various settings they can adjust on the car, so one lap will be one setting,
Okay, Stuart.
the next lap another setting, and then finally do a run of 3 flying laps, 5 in total, and come back in again. It's information gathering. Again, I do emphasise, you know, sometimes drivers, Fisichella is not inexperienced. They sometimes want to start to make changes much too early in the game, and on a track that is as green as this, it's a mistake.
And a bit nerves in low speed on apex and exit, which might be down to the circuit anyway at the moment. So it's very dirty. Grip is very poor at the moment. And it's a question whether we go like this into the race run or we change rear bars.
So what we can do is we can put a bit of front wing on it for the high speed, and also
drop the rear bar down.
And there you are, exactly what you were saying, John. Ralph, with that little more experience perhaps, just explaining to the team that indeed the track is still quite slippery. It might not be worth chasing their tail just yet.
Well, that's always a problem, and every racing driver, I'm amongst them, fell into that trap on frequent occasions. You know, it sometimes pays to be patient, and the teams come with a base setup on their car, very much based on knowledge, information from previous years, and that's the starting point. Now, you work around that, but you shouldn't be getting into major mechanical changes like springs, roll bars, even shock absorbers. The most you should be looking to do is just make minor trim changes on the aerodynamics.
Michael Schumacher beginning to put a lap together now. He's just gone through the first sector with a pretty rapid time, not far off the fastest through the first sector, which is still held by David Coulthard. The lap that David blew up on, well, he still has the fastest first sector time from that, and that's we'll see if that gets beaten. It's Bernoldi still fastest overall though, remember, on a 1 minute 41.247 from Nick Heidfeld, Montoya, Ralf Schumacher, Fisichella and Pedro de la Rosa, and Jenson Button is on a good lap at the moment, and he may well improve in a few moments.
But look at Michael, I mean, there is somebody who's leaning on a car quite heavily. Still not the grip. You could see the car ran wide, but the car is so good. The downforce is there, the balance is there, the mechanical side is there. Michael has the confidence just to lean in the car. He knows the track's still not clean, but I mean, wait to see what the end of this lap. I mean, Bernoldi's 141.2. I suspect this will be a sub 1 minute 40 lap. He was a second up at that first intermediate, and let's say going to be very close to a 39, maybe a low 40. Well, 39.4.
Spot on, John, absolutely. He had the fastest sector times through both second and third sectors. Remember, the track split up into 3 sectors from the point of view of the timing screens, and it gives us an opportunity to see who's fast and which part of the track. Well, Michael setting the fastest times, putting up the purple times on our timing screens for the second and third sectors.
Well, you could see as he came through turn 14, even Michael Schumacher got on a bit of the green stuff. The car slid a little bit, wasn't a problem, checked it, got off the throttle, back on the power again, and already somebody's broken the 100 seconds round the Sepang circuit. Michael Schumacher, the only driver so far to have done that, and of course we're now minus David Coulthard, and only one McLaren on track, this man Kimi Raikkonen.
Well, Schumacher has just set a fastest sector time through the first sector once again, so he's got another purple. Oh, I know, he's just lost it. And he tries to do the karting trick of spinning the rear wheels to turn him back round again. And it's pretty effective. Off he goes again.
Down at turn 9. That again is one of the slowest corners on the circuit. Down to 50 miles an hour. Remember, little aerodynamic downforce or grip, very little mechanical grip. Michael got it wrong, but it did the right thing. He just floored the throttle, made sure he didn't lose the engine, and he knows that he'll be spied. Ross Bowman will be, I think, jibing a bit about that, but even 4 times world champion can get it wrong.
Well, he's fastest anyway at the moment. That would have been a better lap, I'm sure, with the faster first sector, but he's now lost all that pace. Bernoldi second, Heidfeld third. Jenson Button is now 4th fastest. Remember, on the interactive, you can go to the data channel and keep an eye on all the times as they come through. Watch those sector times as the driver goes around a lap to see whether they're about to improve. Let's take another look at Michael's mistake here.
Turns in, maybe just a little bit anxious getting on the power, and despite, of course, traction control is active on these cars, it is still possible to lose control. This is the onboard forward camera view. Michael spins it there, the rubber. Now, he put a lot of rubber down on that set of tyres when he floored the throttle. They don't like that sudden, rapid rise in temperature as they would do with the wheel spinning when the throttle is fully open. It's back into the garage, the car will go. Well, they decided to keep it in the pit lane, and yes, they're going to put it back into the garage. But just an early wake-up call for the world champion as well, just to remind him that the circuit is not quite ready to accept the kind of driving Michael Schumacher wants to put in.
Well, we asked Ferrari what kind of setup the cars need for this track. High downforce, their reply, and good low-speed grip. So plenty of downforce for those faster corners, but the low-speed grip is what was lacking just a little bit there for Michael.
Again, to carry the high downforce the cars run here, you have to have the car suspended in a manner that will deal with that downforce at maybe 180 or 200 miles an hour. But of course, when you get down to 50 miles an hour, there is virtually well, not quite zero, but very, very little downforce in relation to the high speeds. And of course, if you've got that high suspension, that stiff suspension setup, at low speeds, you've got very, very little mechanical grip. And that's what teams are battling all weekend, to find the balance between the high speed and the low speed.
David Coulthard getting a lift back to the pits.
And his car also on the back of that flatbed truck being brought back to the McLaren garage, which is good news for them, because they'll be able to get the car back into the garage, get it up on the axle stands, take the parts, the offending bits out, which I suspect is the engine, and get them ready for the next session, which will start at 1 o'clock local time.
So Michael Schumacher still the pace setter here at the moment, but he's back in the pits. Barrichello is on a reasonably good lap here, so we'll keep an eye on his progress as we see the Brazilian at work in the second of the Ferraris. And as we mentioned, he's gone well here in Malaysia in the past, but I wonder if he's going to be able to push his teammate Michael Schumacher as hard as he did in qualifying last year. Very, very close. Got a bit upset in the race when Michael came storming past, when he thought that they were picking their way through the traffic together. But Rubens here definitely putting in a quick lap.
And I think I'm picking up more traction control from Rubens' car than I was from Michael. Just listen to him as he comes out of 15. There you hear traction control. Now, I didn't hear that from Michael Schumacher's car, so indicating maybe that Rubens has opted for a higher percentage of grip. In other words, traction control, which cuts out the horsepower through the rear wheels when the track's in this configuration. Currently second quickest, what, 0.3 of a second, just under 0.3 slower than Michael Schumacher. Different approach from the two Ferrari drivers.
And remember that traction control wasn't introduced at this race last year. They waited until Barcelona, the Spanish Grand Prix, before traction control was fully introduced again. So it's their first time here in Malaysia back with traction control. Now, Michael Schumacher fastest, as we saw, from Barrichello, Bernoldi, Heidfeld, Jenson Button 5th, Montoya is 6th fastest. Then it's Fisichella, Ralf Schumacher, Kimi Raikkonen and Pedro de la Rosa. Looking further on down the list, some people of course haven't really put together a string of laps. We're on board at the moment with the Sauber of Felipe Massa, just coming up through the last couple of corners that will lead down that straight towards turn 15, the final hairpin.
Very impressive young man. And everybody thinking, well, at 20 years of age, get on the grid, 4th row of the grid, 8th place. So let's see how he deals with turn 15. More gentle on the throttle, but of course he's not activating the traction control on the exit. Barrichello tended to be leaning on the traction control to give rear end stability. Massa seems to be having it slightly dialed out.
So Felipe Massa, who qualified so well in Australia, getting his first taste of this Malaysian circuit and some useful laps under his belt at this stage. Schumacher still our fastest in this first free practice, where everybody is basically just accumulating data for the whole weekend. They're not going for a qualifying setup at this stage, and as we've already seen, the track is dirty. A lot of people are having half spins, full spins. Even this man, 4 times world champion Michael Schumacher, having a spin just now but recovering it okay. Meanwhile, David Coulthard seems to be pushing his own car home.
I'm not sure he's actually permitted to do that. I mean, and ideally a car should not be brought to the pit lane exit and then the driver push it down, but certainly we're seeing some unusual sights here in this first session in Malaysia, and this is probably the most strange I've ever seen. A driver pushing his car back down the pit lane, and I don't know whether he's allowed to do that or whether maybe he's not allowed to have outside assistance, but it's irrelevant because this car will not take part in any further proceedings in this session. And there you can see on the right hand side of the car where there was damage to the bodywork, maybe superficial, but of course that bodywork will be taken off and replaced by fresh spare bodywork, and now the guys in the pit lane able to assist David to get that car. All that fire extinguisher powder gets everywhere. It is a real pain for the guys to clean it out, and it is critical they get every bit of that cleared out before the car would be permitted to start the second practice session this afternoon.
Yeah, but that's what he's trying to do. Oh, and the Barrichello running wide now. He was on a very good lap indeed there. He'd had some personal bests. He's got off down at turn 12, and Barrichello, who looked as though he might just go faster than Michael Schumacher, has run off onto the gravel.
Well, everybody's really finding just how slippery the Sepang circuit is today. There was rain last night, which may have contributed to really making the track greener than green. Maybe it's grown the grass. Just coming around turn 12, runs onto the grass, misses 14, which of course would take him down that long parallel straight to the start-finish straight. And for Rubens, who was running, I believe, a higher percentage of, well, he just ran wide, got onto the curb, and then of course he became a passenger. But fortunately for him, the gravel here is sufficiently compacted again to enable him to drive through it and not get trapped, as we see in other circuits where the gravel is obviously very much more porous than we have here.
So Barrichello makes it safely back into the pits, at least no damage done, and he'll be able to come back out in a moment or two. But once again, evidence of just how slippery the track is in its early running. Still some 20 minutes to go in this first free practice session in Malaysia. High temperatures and a lot of sweating going on. David Coulthard, I should imagine, had a pretty good workout pushing that car back in these temperatures, John.
It'll be tough. I mean, a Formula One car has got to be relatively resistance-free, but of course, the brakes, there'll be a certain amount of brake drag effect, and that's quite hard. You're pushing with resistance. So David having to push the car a long, long way down the pit lane.
So on track at the moment. Good to see the Renault out there of R02, but he has just completed 6 laps so far at the moment. But Matt Lorenzo is going to have a chat with John Walton, I do believe. Matt.
That's right, Ben. Yes, we're joined now by the team principal at Minardi. John, has the party ended yet?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I was just wondering, I gather we missed something of a party in Melbourne, and I just wonder whether it had ended yet.
Yeah, we're back to reality now, and it's a new weekend, a new race, so we got to get our feet back on the ground and get on with the job, basically.
What are the chances then of your second driver getting in the points in his first Malaysian Grand Prix?
Well, he was pretty close to it in Melbourne, and here with Grand Prix racing these days, anything can happen. We got to give it our best shot, and at the end of the day, if the cars are still running towards the end, well then you're in with a chance of scoring something.
Well, of all the drivers, he's got to be the best acclimatised.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I'm just saying, of all the drivers, he's got to be the one who's best used to those conditions.
Yeah, he has been training quite hard, so we hope the fact that he is local, he should be a bit more used to it than most people, so it should work in our favour.
All right, John, thanks for joining us, and good luck in the race.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to John Walton. The Minardi camp certainly had their celebrations in Australia, but as we've seen, hasn't gone perfectly for them this morning, with Mark Webber going off very, very early in this session and not getting any useful track mileage in this session.
Well, let's have a look and see what Ralf Schumacher can achieve. Currently 9th quickest. He also suffered a spin, but he had the wisdom to come in and say, well, I think the track really isn't quick enough to push very hard. Do you want to do a bit of long duration running, or maybe make a small change in the car and see if there is a response? So whether they've chosen to put more fuel into the car and go for that, or maybe make a car change and see what they can get out of the car, I suspect they might go for the fuel load.
Now, Alan McNish sitting in the pits. He hasn't actually done any timed laps as yet, and that would indicate, I would have thought, a problem, because I would have imagined Alan would be out to just give the car a bit of a run. He has raced here before, so he knows the track. It's not as if he needs the mileage from that point of view, so perhaps he is just waiting for a cleaner line to develop. He's coming out now. Everything looks okay.
Well, Toyota did a test here last year with the original test vehicle, so they've got probably more information about this circuit than probably any other they're going to go to outside of possibly Barcelona, where they've also done quite a lot of testing. But let's ride with Ralph.
Watching from the onboard camera on the nose cone here, just coming through turn 14. Now, watch out for the heavy braking into turn 15, down from about 190 miles an hour to about 50 miles an hour. The carbon brakes working hard. You can see it weaving a little bit under braking. The traction control cuts in on the exit. and he comes around to complete the lap. As you can see, some way off the pace at the moment. Gerhard Berger watching the progress of Ralf Schumacher. Juan Montoya as well on track at the moment, and Juan Pablo down in 8th place at this point.
Well, there, a big fistful of opposite lock once again from the Colombian. Turned in, he brakes pretty late, turned in, the back end wouldn't accept the level of speed he needed for the amount of lock he had turned in with, and the back stepped out. So Juan Pablo probably saying, oh, the car, he understeers here, he always steers there.
Oil pump 1, oil pump.
Well, see if we can hear any more on the radio with Juan Montoya. Meanwhile, let me tell you, Schumacher's on a good lap. He's just set fastest times in first and second sectors. It looks as though Michael Schumacher is going to dip below the 1 minute 39s.
And he's just going to come up to complete the lap in turn 15, so it's really this last sector we expect to see an improvement. 139.462. That was his previous best. So we wait for Michael Schumacher as he comes up pit straight. 38.626. Michael Schumacher just knocks another second off it.
Yeah, that's better then.
Oh, look at the correction going on here. You can hear how difficult it is.
Slightly over theory 1. Sorry, so bad that you're not going to get a read on the quick, so I can't push it.
And he's really struggling to get a rhythm, as he says at the moment, trying to do radio checks, trying to correct the car at the same time. Looking a little bit all over the place for Montoya.
Yeah, that was through turns 5 and 6, and the car not comfortable to drive at all. Even the team could see on the monitors there's a handling problem, and Patrick Head's face probably sums it up. Well, that's not very good chap, is it?
No, he doesn't look impressed by the way that car was going through some of the turns. Alan McNish on track, as Michael Schumacher was looking to be on a very quick lap again. It's still on a fairly fast lap, I have to say. Alan McNish himself last on the times, but that's simply because he hasn't put a lap together as yet. He will do that in just a moment when he comes through the final corner here at turn 15. Hard on the power. That Toyota engine working hard as he comes up to cross the line. And this pops Alan somewhat further up the order. He's up into 18th place. Michael Schumacher, Barrichello, Nick Heidfeld, and then Bernoldi, Button and Frentzen are top 6.
And Frentzen is currently on a lap which is indicating he's been personally quickest through the first 2 segments. So Heinz-Harald Frentzen on a reasonable lap. And he's coming through turn 15 again, also making his way up through, but as a lap he lost something in that last corner because he's a 1/10 of a second slower than his current 6th place time. So maybe just again, like others we've seen, let the car slip, get wide and lose time.
Well, Alan McNish is keeping it all together at the moment and looking quick and using the road out to the curb, but so far so good, keeping it all under control. Just about just over 12 minutes to go in this session. He's working pretty hard at it.
Yeah, I thought the car looked reasonably neat and tidy until we saw him come through 7, and there's a big load of understeer. You could see the amount of lock he's having to put on to get the car to turn. Again, maybe just simply a function of the circuit. Again, the team maybe going with a fairly conservative car setup, not too aggressive at this stage. They'll get towards that as we get into qualifying tomorrow. Again, you can see how he's leaning in the car pretty heavily, but again, the back end where he goes from left to right, starting to get a bit agitated, starting to bounce up and down. Maybe he needs to do a little bit of work on those rear dampers.
Well, maybe that's the thing to do. He's got plenty of time to work it out. Down towards turn 15, that final corner once again, hard on the brakes. Keep it all tidy here. Gets it nice and neatly into the apex of the corner. And then hard on the power, the traction control, cutting in a bit, but not as aggressively as we heard, particularly from Rubens Barrichello's car earlier on. Across the line, and 16th fastest for Alan McNish at this stage. Quick mention though, John, we've seen both Bernoldi and Frentzen going well so far. The Arrows, we remember with the Ford engine this year, rather smoky looking brakes on the Sauber there. Ford engine in the back of the Arrows, and that seems to be going quite well in the free practice this morning.
Well, also remember the Arrows are on the Bridgestone tyre, and that is a quick car. I mean, we've seen very high speeds from Bernoldi earlier in the session. He, in fact, at one stage had the highest top speed down into the first turn, but that is the same engine that the two Jaguars here are running. So, I mean, when Niki Lauda did the deal with Tom Walkinshaw, maybe there were reasons behind it, but one thing's for sure, if this car or both these orange Arrows finish ahead of the two green Jaguars in qualifying, there will be questions asked on top of already the questions that are being asked.
Balance, please. Yeah, generally I'm quite happy that the balance between slow and high-speed corners is more or less similar. The guy is a little bit nervous on the high-speed corners. It's not a lack of... doesn't feel like that there's something you can do aerodynamically. It's more front wing or downforce.
So Heinz-Harald Frentzen gets pushed away. The McLarens have already had a difficult time. We know with David Coulthard's car expiring earlier on. Peter Windsor is with Mario Ilian. We might be able to find out more.
Yes, thanks very much, Ben. Mario, an unfortunate start to the weekend for David. What's the information so far on that problem?
We don't know yet. He had possibly a leak of some sort and the car caught fire. But he was lucky enough they could push it back to the garage and the guys can work on it now.
Well, it's great to have a driver as fit as that.
Well, it's very good, yes, for sure.
How much damage does that extinguishant cause on the car?
Well, he makes a huge mess, but I don't think there is damage from that. You just have to clean it all up and we have to see what the problem is.
But you got a head start on the engine change. How long will it take to change the engine?
Well, we're not sure whether we have to change the engine. That's not sure yet.
Okay, well, very best of luck for the next session.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter, and well, let's hope that they don't have to change the engine. He'll be all right to get out in that next session. Barrichello is on a quick one here. This could be enough, John, to see him eclipse Michael Schumacher's fastest time so far.
Quickest in the first sector, personal best in the second sector, comes across start finish line.
No,
not
quite enough. That
by a
last
second,
sector.
by a second, well, 0.976.
But most of that was lost in the last sector. In fact, he was some 0.8 slower than Michael's time through that final sector.
Looking into the McLaren garage, you see all the guys wearing those face masks. That's to protect them from the extinguishant powder. It is awful stuff to work with. Mario Ilian saying that it wasn't an engine failure, it may have been a hydraulic failure or something fluid-wise, but whatever it was, it caught fire, which indicates to me it was either oil or hydraulic fluid, both of which in the temperature under the engine cover would ignite on contact with the exhaust system.
We're looking at the other Arrows here. This is Enrique Bernoldi. He's fourth fastest currently, remember. That's a good effort, and across the line he goes. Well, he stays fourth fastest. That's not an improvement in time, but only a 10th slower than his previous best. So both Arrows in good shape.
There you can see just in the McLaren engine cover there's a bit of burning where the scalloping, the shape of the bodywork cuts in, and that's very close to the exhaust system.
So the Arrows continue on their way. Just looking at the list at the moment, there's Bernoldi, just under 7.5 minutes of this session to go. Just looking down the list, John, you have to say that we haven't seen the Williams perform quite as well as we might have expected. We've got Montoya down in 8th place at the moment. Ralph is down in 10th position. Raikkonen as well. He's not had the same mechanical problems that Coulthard's had, but he's down in 12th.
Well, if you look down, the top 4 cars are all Bridgestone tyres. The first Michelin car is Jenson Button, and he's sort of the only Michelin car in the top 6. So you've got Fenson, who's in 6th place, then you've got Trulli in the second, Renault in 7th. So Renault are really the best of the field with the Michelin tyre.
That's an impressive performance from the two Renault drivers, and certainly we're expecting much better things of them over the course of this season than they managed last year. The new car, a big improvement. The new engine, of course, a big improvement as well. Still the work and the concerns going on in the McLaren pit.
And Team Boss, Ron Dennis, looking at to see how much damage has been done, if it is just simply a fluid that has got onto the exhaust system or whether it's something more serious. Nobody wanting to commit and say it is anything more than that. But once they get the underbody off and the bodywork around the engine clear, they can examine and find out what was the cause. That very abrupt stop for David Coulthard, and of course we did see the flames licking from the right hand side of the car. But let's look again at Jenson Button, who currently in 5th place. So far doesn't look anything particularly special on our timing screens, but another lap of information gathering. Car looks reasonably good right now. He's getting a little bit more grip. That's out of turn 9. He's 9 on the return leg back to complete yet another lap.
Yeah, it was a disappointing first Grand Prix for Jenson Button, involved in the first corner accident, remember? Bits of car falling off, and he tried to limp round, but it was all over for him. Great shame. He'd qualified in 11th place for that race. Qualified 17th here last year with the car that really wasn't performing very well. Also raced the Williams here in 2000. But Jenson Button certainly going reasonably well on this occasion. 5th place at the moment. Now, we saw Mark Webber go off, I'm afraid, early on in this session, but I think we can catch up with him now down in the pit lane.
Mark Webber, after the success and the elation of the last race, you've encountered your first problem. What happened on the track?
Well, we had a small problem with the downshift, which upset the car a little bit, then I just couldn't hold it, so we're having a little look now, and we're also getting used to the new Michelin tyre as well, so...
It's pretty obvious that the spare car's not set up for you. How disruptive is that for you, and can you get out this afternoon? Will your car be ready?
Yeah, we should be fine for the next session. Everything's, you know, the car's not damaged, so should be get out the next session, and the track's obviously getting more rubber, so it'd be good to get out the next session.
Of course, this is probably deemed as your second home race for the team. Is there less pressure on you this week? Is it Alex's turn?
There's no question we want to do well, you know, obviously because we've got a lot of good sponsors here in Malaysia, and we want to make a good showing for them. So not a good start, but we'll make up for it tomorrow.
Thanks, Mark.
So Mark Webber with some work to do this weekend. Meanwhile, we're keeping an eye on Jarno Trulli here, still 7th fastest.
I
Teammate.
think it made a little bit more oversteering on braking. And I think that's about all it did, really.
Jenson Button.
Okay, do you think that was a front change, or the rear tyre just giving up and you hooking first a bit earlier?
I think the rear tyres are giving up slightly, but it's very difficult to judge what was the problem then. The rear tyres are going off, but I had more oversteer with a change. It's a difficult one.
Okay, James, you might have to jump out. We've only got 3 minutes left. Let's sort out what we're going to do in the hour break.
So Jenson going through with the team what's working and what's not working. Meanwhile, things are working pretty well for Sauber. Look, Nick Heidfeld's just popped up into 3rd position. That's a good effort from him. And his teammate Felipe Massa not that far up. He's down in 16th. But Nick Heidfeld, here he is, going quickly now in the Sauber Petronas.
That little Sauber really is a pretty special car. It's a car that's been very kind to the young drivers in the team. Heidfeld, of course, more experienced than Felipe Massa, but it's still a car that really is working for you. We've seen so many cars in this session so far. We're only just 2 minutes and 25 seconds away from the end that have caught out drivers, and some of them as illustrious as the Schumacher brothers.
Well, I certainly think we can expect to see some good things very quick down through that 12 and 13 section, now through 14.
Then interesting, we saw Ignatius Toyota through there, and it looked a bit sloppy in the rear. You can see how taut the Sauber is. It gave really ratchety sort of bump, but it was in control. So a different approach from Sauber team.
It looked good, and we'll see whether this is an improvement. I don't think this is going to be an improvement from Heidfeld. Looking at the data channel, we can see that the times are not an improvement on his previous good lap. The last sector was a personal best, but the lap overall slower than his previous best. But that previous one has put him up into 3rd place. We've got the 2 Ferraris, 1st and 2nd, and then a Ferrari-powered car, the Sauber, in 3rd. Bernaldi still holding on to 4th ahead of Jenson Button, and then Takuma Sato in 6th.
Michael Schumacher down to his bogey corner, the one he spun turn 9. This time no problem at all. They've got now just over a minute remaining, so he'll want to get past start-finish line to get one more lap in before the checkered flag comes out to bring this first 1 hour session in Sepang.
Oh, look at that.
Well, he's pushing hard, you can tell.
I love that sequence of corners. Great view, and you could really see the car working hard, and Michael Schumacher carries so much speed through there. A little bit like we saw at Suzuka at the end of last year. So fast through those corners that are seeing fast direction change. Now let's just watch him through the last part of the lap. Not a particularly rapid lap, I don't think, unless he's put together a really fast final sector across the line. It is not an improvement, although it is another rapid lap, and he just set the fastest final sector time.
But of course he's got another lap. He's got to cross the line before the flag comes out, as we watch Juan Pablo Montoya. And Benoldi, well, he's pulled off or spun. We have to wait and see what the replay says. That's again down at that turn 9, catching out a lot of people turn 9 this morning.
Yeah, so that's a great disappointment after performing very quickly. Enrique Benoldi still 4th fastest overall, remember, and there's some tyre marks down there, but it's a little difficult to see what happened. Maybe we'll take another look. The checkered flag is about to come out, but Michael Schumacher is on a lap. There we are, checkered flag on the first free practice of Malaysia comes out, but Michael Schumacher can still finish this lap and could possibly still improve his overall time.
Of course, the yellow flag is out down in that turn 9 zone, so he has got to go through there slower than his personal best is. Otherwise, he could find himself being lightened by a few $1,000s for that particular privilege.
Yeah, so I'm sure that he will take things a little steady. Benoldi gets out of his car, and that's the end of his session, but at least it happened at the end of the session, and he hasn't lost any valuable running time. Meanwhile, Montoya is still out there on circuit at the moment. Number of cars finishing off their laps at this point. We'll see if there are any changes, but I can't see too many purple colours coming up on our data screen, so I don't think we'll see too many changes here.
Well, Montoya coming through 5 again, and this is where the car looked very, very uncomfortable, very unstable a little earlier in the session. And Montoya's got Sato ahead of him and Panis as they come down into this double right-handed turn 7, and they've taken really as one corner rather than 2 separate corners. So again, yellow flag once again down where Benoldi is. You can see something in the track, and there you can see portion of the car off to the inside, but I think this lap probably Montoya may not even bother completing it. He'll just come into the pits traffic ahead. So it's all over. The session, in fact, as we know, is over now as well.
So Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello continue.
We'll also go burn out after the stop. The stop in the box, and then just burn the rear tyres, Juan. Burn the rear tyres.
Just listening in again on the radio there between Williams
to watch B, Tony, yeah.
team and Juan Pablo Montoya. But just to confirm that Ferraris are on top once again, as we're used to seeing here in Malaysia. There was a practice stop from Ralf Schumacher then a second ago, laying a bit of rubber down in the pit lane. But the Ferraris 1 and 2. Michael Schumacher ahead of Rubens Barrichello. Nick Heidfeld with that Ferrari-sourced Petronas engine in the back of his Sauber, 3rd fastest. Then the Ford-powered car of Benoldi in 4th place. Jenson Button going well today. I have to say it's good news to see the British driver beginning to feature back at the top of the timesheets after such a dreadful year last season. Montoya only 10th fastest. I think that Williams will be a little bit disappointed, but of course we don't know just how much fuel they're running in that car.
That's true, but one team that will be quite happy, in fact, is the Jordan team, who had a pretty awful first race in Melbourne, because Takuma Sato is actually 6th quickest just at the very end of the session, so good job from little Sato.
They had a limiter in first gear.
Well, Benoldi was very impressive in that session and had one of the fastest speed trap figures. Peter Windsor. Peter, you're with Tom Walkinshaw. I wonder if we can find out why it's going so fast.
Well, Tom, the question from Ben Edwards is, why are you going so quick this morning?
Well, the car was quick in Melbourne. We just didn't get it on the track and qualify when we should have done. Heinz was very quick in the race and he was running there on full tank, so we know we've got a quick car, and it's just we've got to make sure we get it on the track and get the best out of it.
And what's the news on Enrique's problem?
He went out and he just stopped. We don't see what the problem is, but they made a couple of little changes to the diff map, and then it stopped halfway around the lap, so we don't know yet.
Okay, and can we talk a little bit about the engines this year? You must be very pleased with the way they're going so far.
Yeah, Cosworth are doing a good job. It's a good, strong engine, so we're fortunate to have that, and I think it gives us a chance to show what we're capable of with the car.
And it's so sad to see Jaguar in that situation.
Well, it's not my business.
Thanks very much, Tom. Best of luck.
Take care.
Yeah, I'm sure that Tom's not at all worried to see Jaguar struggling while they're doing reasonably well with the same engine in the back of their Arrows chassis.
Well, not much sympathy from Tom Walkinshaw. Of course, he ran the Jaguar sports car team at the back end of the 80s and early 90s, but Formula One's a different business, and Walkinshaw, like everybody, is there to do the best for themselves, and little sympathy for what's going on at Jaguar. Make hay while the sun shines, Tom, that's what I would say.
Looking at the sector speeds, the trap speeds, interesting, Bernoldi fastest at one of them, and showing that Ford power certainly produces plenty of grunt. Looking at the times there, you can see that it's Bridgestones that are dominating the timesheets. Jenson Button the fastest of the Michelin users, and Diano Trulli some way off that, down in 8th place, Montoya down in 10th. So the indications are at the moment, we all thought that the high track temperatures would favour Michelin. Michael Schumacher said the other day that, well, don't be so sure about that. We've got a good tyre from Bridgestone for hot weather conditions, and at the moment, it's looking very much that way.
The big breakthrough, I think, for Bridgestone came at last year's French Grand Prix. Different tyre, different philosophy, and really since then they've had a tyre that's worked either hot, cold, or anything in the middle. And Michelin really have got to find a way to tackle what Bridgestone are doing, particularly when they're on a Ferrari with Michael Schumacher. It's a pretty devastating package.
It certainly is, and two drivers there who didn't manage to get much running at the end with their problems. Now, Matt Lorenzo, I think, has got a chance to catch up with Dave Richards. Matt?
Yes, I hope so, Ben. Dave, thanks for joining us. 16th and 15th, what are your impressions of that first session?
Dave, wake up.
We're going to tape with Flavio, Steve. Flavio, great performance this morning from Jenson. Tell us a little bit about Jenson.
Well, I'm sorry we lost the audio on that, as was fairly obvious to all of you, but hopefully we'll get Dave back in vision and sound in just a moment. In the meantime, enjoy the highlights of that first session.